that shame, that anti-abortion stigma is just so, so powerful, so ingrained in, all the messaging that we're told. And there's also this strange idea that you can't be a parent and also have an abortion. And we know that is not true, because the majority of people who have abortions are already parents. And so once I realized that, I was like, oh, okay, like I can still feel happy about wanting to be a parent later down the road.
Yeah.
But I had no idea about that. I thought there was just, no, you can't be a parent if you've had an abortion.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense and isn't true, because having an abortion can be a parenting decision.
I'm Keltie McGuire, and you're listening to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Today's episode of the Kids Are Childfree podcast focuses on reproductive decision-making. And of course, we talk about reproductive decision-making each and every week here on the podcast, but we're going to be talking about some different facets of it, including abortion. Now, if you have ever had an abortion, perhaps you've asked how and if that is affecting or intersecting with the current decision that you're facing right now of whether or not to have a child. And this conversation that I'm about to have was actually sparked by a message I received from one of you who shared that she had some concerns about whether a past abortion was making her second guess or changing her feelings about whether or not she wanted to have kids, and bringing up a lot of emotions and sort of additional confusion around the Kids Are Child-Free choice. So I'm super, super grateful for the person who reached out to me, because this is a topic that we certainly need to be talking about on the podcast, the topic of abortion. And today you're going to be hearing from none other than Becca Rea-Tucker, who is an Austin, Texas-based author, baker, and abortion rights advocate. Becca loves almond croissants, me too, and creating spaces where people who have abortions feel seen and supported. Known online as the Sweet Feminist, Becca merges baking and advocacy to help break down abortion stigma, sharing daily affirmations and resources with a community of thousands. Becca is the author of the cookbook Baking by Feel and the upcoming The Abortion Companion. Becca, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to delve into this conversation and to hear about both your own Kids Are Child-Free journey, as well as some of your wisdom and expertise that you can share with our listeners today. So perhaps to start us off, you can just share a little bit about yourself and who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Becca Rea-Tucker. I am a baker, author, and reproductive rights advocate, and I currently live in Austin, Texas. But I'm from the Midwest, and I lived in Washington, D.C. for a long time. I run an Instagram account called The Sweet Feminist, and you might have seen some of my cakes, probably pink, with feminist slogans floating around the internet. And I also run a Substack called A Little Something Sweet. And so my work kind of combines baking and abortion advocacy. And I just do those things in tandem. And I believe you can have multi interests and passions. And so I just do both of those together. And so I am the author of Baking by Feel, which is a cookbook that explores the connection between baking and feelings. And I also have another upcoming book, The Abortion Companion, which is a compassionate illustrated guide to help people navigate having an abortion or reflect on their experiences. So I'd say overall, my goal is to break down abortion stigma and also show people that they aren't alone in what they're feeling, whatever those feelings might be. And I am also the mother of a very chill and very fun, almost 1-year-old.
Okay, super curious. And I know we're going to talk more about your business and the work you do, or your, I don't know if business is the right framing, but of course.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. Mm-hmm. And you know what, let me just say, as a fellow business owner, I won't call myself a thought leader because that sounds really
You can.
We're thought leaders,
I like
right?
It.
I have thoughts. I lead, a voice in the online space. We are often taught like stick to a lane. One thing has nothing to do with another. I think as business owners, brands, what have you, it's always like, we got to pick this niche. And I just love that you have incorporated what may seem to be contrasting things, or at least things that don't seem like they're maybe compatible or make sense, in a way that just works so brilliantly and has you standing out in a really unique way. So I want to offer both first of all, a compliment for that. And for, I know this isn't a business podcast, but for, but for any listeners who are thinking like, how can I do and be maybe not all the things, but things that at first glimpse seem to conflict with one another, you can look to the Sweet Feminist. So,
thank you.
How did like the cake and abortion angle come together?
Yeah, so I've always loved baking. My grandma taught me to bake, and I was living in DC at the time that Trump was elected, and Kavanaugh was confirmed to the Supreme Court, and I was working at a bakery at that time, and I was looking for a way to connect with other people online, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna like make this Instagram account. I'm gonna write things on cakes and just see how that goes, and it really became much bigger than I ever could have imagined, and I'm really grateful for that. I think a lot of that is luck and persistence, and so I think you should use whatever medium you have available to you. I am a baker, so that's what I used, and it's just sort of changed along the way to be different things at different times. And right now, I'm mostly focused on abortion work, but I also write my recipes. I wrote a cookbook, and I guess does that answer my question?
Yeah, no, for sure. And can people also buy your cakes if they're in
No,
Austin?
I do not sell. Okay. I do not sell cakes. I do cakes under the table for friends, that kind of stuff. Right. But I like teaching other people how to bake. Yeah. I have worked in bakeries. I know what that's like. It is hard. It is a grind. And that's just not what I like to do. I like to, empower people who are baking at home to feel confident in their techniques. And so for me, it's more about the home, the one-to-one experience of sharing baked goods with people and the internet, I guess. But I don't want to open a bakery. I feel pretty clear about that.
Well, no, it's good to have that clarity, right? Because I'm sure you've had many people suggest it to you, or
yes,
like every day. I won't be one of them.
I love going to bakeries. I mean, I'm a huge bakery fan.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So tell us, you mentioned that you have a 1-year-old, which sounds exciting. I mean, you can put into your own words, is it chaotic, delightful, crazy, all of the things?
Sure. Yeah. She is very chill.
Amazing.
We got really lucky. Yeah. I don't think it's anything that we've done. But we felt really, really lucky. She's just fun, and she does new things every day. Like right now she's like almost walking. Exciting. And I just like to see her do stuff. And for me, like I always knew that I wanted to be a parent. I knew that, before my abortion, I knew that after my abortion. And I'm pleasantly, I feel validated that it is something that I do like. Cause you never know, even if you want to do something, it might not be something that you genuinely, end up enjoying. But for me, I've only done the first year, so who knows after that. But for me, I have really, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. And I'm laughing when I said, like, is it chaotic? What's it? Me and Becca, just a moment ago, I had my dog barking. We were talking about dogs, and really smart dogs who sometimes can also be a little troublemakers. So it turns out maybe having a child I'm not going to say it's easier than having a dog.
Our dog is very high maintenance. My dog is very high maintenance. So, I mean, he's more obnoxious than her for sure. But she's sleeping right now. It is chaos. Okay. It's absolutely chaos. I just enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, and, I appreciate you saying that, because I think we sometimes have these ideas that just because something's hard or chaotic, or we don't sleep, or we're stressed about it, that it means we shouldn't do it. And I can think of so many wonderful things in my life that have involved all of those things.
Yep.
It's kind of like just a pick your poison sort of thing. Like what goes hand in hand with that we also enjoy. And it sounds like you get a lot of pleasure out of being a mom.
I do absolutely, and I got so much more sleep as a mom than I did as a pregnant person. So that part actually improved for me.
Pleasant surprise. Yeah. Okay, so you shared that you've always wanted kids. You wanted a child or children before your abortion. You wanted kids after. I want to talk about the timing piece, because just because we want a child doesn't mean like now is necessarily the time. And for a lot of
Yeah.
people, they feel like they're never quite ready. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to like how you knew the timing wasn't right, and then how you knew the timing was right. And can you ever really know? I know
Yeah.
realize that was like 6 questions in one, but
No, I got it.
you got the plot.
It all connects. So I got pregnant for the first time when I was 20, and I was a college student in rural Iowa, a really small college. And I knew, like, I'd been with my boyfriend for like, I don't know, 2 months maybe before that. And I just knew, like, I don't want to continue a pregnancy right now. I knew that immediately. I never, wavered from that decision. And we'll go into that more lately.
Yeah.
But at that time I was like, no, this is like absolutely not right for me. But that doesn't mean it didn't feel difficult to me. Like at that time I had a lot of like internalized shame and anti-abortion stigma that was telling me like, you'll never be able to enjoy motherhood if you say no to this path this time. And in my experience, that has absolutely not been the case, which I'm really glad to share about. But second time I got pregnant was in 2022, right after Roe fell. I live in Texas, so it's a scary time to be pregnant here in Texas, since abortion access is restricted, and that includes miscarriage care and that kind of stuff. So my husband and I weren't really trying, we weren't really not trying, but I ended up getting pregnant like that first month, and it really freaked me out. And it felt similar to pregnancy the first time, when I was like, I feel really trapped in my body. This isn't what I want. And it scared me. Like I had a pretty severe dip in my mental health, even though I thought that it was something that I was wanting to do at that time. It turns out it wasn't. And while I was trying to process all that, figure out what I was going to do, I had a miscarriage. And I think sometimes there's a lot of shame that can happen, when you feel relieved about having a miscarriage. And I, had to work through that. But then my third pregnancy, almost a year after that, I took the test and I was like psyched. I was excited. And I don't know exactly what that change was. It wasn't like I decided now I am ready, everything is in place. It wasn't like that. It was just my heart and my brain were like, let's do it. And I found a midwife that I felt really supported by, and sort of had more structures in place to navigate moving into this phase of pregnancy that you plan to continue. Because I think, for people who have had abortions, and felt really trapped in their body, were really uncomfortable with the experience of pregnancy, it can be, very triggering, even if you want to be pregnant this time, even if you want to have a child. And that's fine. Like all of these layers of emotions that you might feel about it are fine. Like you don't have to unravel them to make it uncomplicated. It's okay that it is complicated, and you can just, take that and move forward.
That is such good advice. And I think it applies so well to people who are grappling with this decision of whether or not to have kids, because there's this sense or feeling of like, I have to unpick this complexity. I have to figure out like what's playing into these feelings. And I also really appreciate with the abortion, with the miscarriage, with finally becoming more confidently pregnant, like with all of those things, there were still different emotions and kind of feelings and complexities tied up in that. Perhaps some that run contrary to how we're told we should feel or what an experience should be like. And that can be so just alarming for people. I've received messages from and had coaching calls with women who are like, I thought I wanted to be pregnant and then I became pregnant. And now I don't know what to do. Or like, somebody who had an ectopic pregnancy or miscarriage, and then there's this feeling of relief, but they're confused about it because they're thinking like, and now they're questioning the whole decision altogether. And so I really appreciate you giving voice to those mixed emotions and also offering that it's so hard to just sit with them. Like, I think that's true of any difficult or complicated experience that we have. But just to hold them? Like, or would you say for you, is there a processing that happens or happened with any of those? And if so, what did that look like in terms of working through some of those emotions?
Yeah, for me, it helped to sort of draw a distinction between the experience of pregnancy and this experience of parenthood. Because I never enjoyed pregnancy. There was never a point where I was like, I feel really excited about being pregnant. I love being pregnant. And that people don't really, I don't know if people really draw that distinction hard enough that if you don't enjoy being pregnant, you can still enjoy parenthood. And it's, for me, it's a very distinct thing. So I don't know, for me, pregnancy was something to get through, to get to the parenthood. And yeah, I mean, that's hard. It's just, it is hard to do that.
Yeah. And so having that vision of like why you wanted to be a parent and what that experience might be like, or what you hoped it would be like, was that something then that you held on to through the difficulties of pregnancy?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I was excited about having the kid for sure.
Yeah. It sounds like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I did hold on to that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to talk about all of this in a little bit more detail. I want to talk first of all about your abortion when you were 20, because it sounded like there was no question in your mind that at that time you were not going to be having this baby or continuing the pregnancy, maybe more apt language. Where did that certainty come from? And then talk to me about, like, my understanding is for a long time you didn't talk about that abortion. And so I'm wondering what was tied up in that in terms of the feelings you had.
Yeah. So I knew I didn't want to be pregnant right away, but I really had no idea how to access care. And I grew up with a lot of messaging that was like, yeah, abortion is okay, I guess, but, not for me. I would never have an abortion.
Yeah.
I'd heard a lot of that. And then, suddenly I'm someone who, is definitely going to have an abortion. And so I had to work through, like, what is my actual feeling about this versus what, people around me had told me, what society had told me, what is mine versus the scripts that I'd been given. But for me, it was hard to figure out what to do. Like, even though I was sure about the decision, like, I'm on the internet Googling, like, how to get an abortion in Iowa. And there's, results for fake clinics. There's, OB offices that don't offer abortion care. So what I actually ended up doing was going to an OB and having an ultrasound that I didn't realize I didn't have to have. You do not have to have an ultrasound if you, unless the state requires it. You don't have to have an ultrasound in order to have an abortion. And so I was at this doctor's office having this ultrasound, and the tech was saying something to me about a baby. And I was like, no, I'm not planning to continue this pregnancy. And she was kind of shocked by that. And so I left that experience with a lot of shame. I went and cried in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant with my boyfriend. And I didn't have to do all that, but I had no idea what I was supposed to do. So I ended up finding a clinic that was in Iowa City, which is 60 minutes away from my small college, and I forgot where I'm going.
That's okay. I was just curious. And I'm liking this story. I mean, I was curious about sort of those emotions tied up in it and why there was secrecy around it after.
Yeah,
I mean, so, I can imagine, but I want to hear your words. Yeah.
So I went to this really small college in the middle of nowhere, like 1,600 students. And I was so afraid that if, one person knew, then everybody was going to know. And then I was going to feel a lot of judgment, a lot of shame. Like, that's a really vulnerable place to be. And I just really, really didn't want to experience that. Yeah. And that comes from abortion stigma. Like, I don't know. I didn't know how people would actually react, but I had assumed that it would be this, like, super judgmental thing. And so I just didn't tell anybody for many years, like 5 years. And then I had moved to DC and sort of become more active in this, I want to make the world a better place space. And I saw people sharing their abortion stories. And at when I had my abortion, I'd only heard one person talk about their abortion ever in real life. And so I was like, wow, like these people are sharing these things, and it's such a gift to other people to share your experience in that way. And so that helped me work through that shame that I had. I'm like, why do I actually have this shame? Maybe it's because this is so hidden. This is something that's so you keep it to yourself. You don't talk to other people about it. So, and most of these like conversations that I was seeing were on the internet of people that were sharing their abortion stories. So that sort of made me a lot more confident to share my experiences. First, I did it anonymously through the Sweet Feminist account. I was talking about abortion. I didn't have my name on the account for a long time. And it took me longer to say, I actually had this abortion. This was my experience. But sort of once I started doing that, I just never stopped talking about it. It became sort of second nature to me. It seems, it's very, I don't know. It seems crazy to me that I didn't used to talk about it since, this is what I talk about all the time. Now, but that shame, that anti-abortion stigma is just so, so powerful, so ingrained in, all the messaging that we're told. And there's also this strange idea that you can't be a parent and also have an abortion. And we know that is not true, because the majority of people who have abortions are already parents. And so once I realized that, I was like, oh, okay, like I can still feel happy about wanting to be a parent later down the road. But I had no idea about that. I thought there was just, no, you can't be a parent if you've had an abortion. And that doesn't make any sense and isn't true, because having an abortion can be a parenting decision.
Well said. And, I think when we're on the other side of these things, like having spoken out, and it sounds like for you, the experience of talking about your abortion is what helped you finally to like find more confidence and to drop that shame and to be like, actually, this is just something I did. It doesn't have to define me, and it doesn't need to be a secret, and it's not bad. And I think a lot of us, like I was going through some of the posts on your account, and I have to say for anyone, whether you've had an abortion, whether you may have an abortion, whether you certainly know someone, I can tell you, who has had an abortion, it just is, I find your messages really help us drop a lot of like the language we use, the assumptions we make, like you say, the stigma around abortion, these statements like abortion's fine for other people, but not for me. Or, nobody wants to have an abortion was one that I saw that someone had shared or commented on. And you were like, actually, a lot of people, a commenter said that actually.
People don't want to be, many people don't want to be pregnant. And that is like it's a subtle linguistic shift, but it is important, because I definitely wanted to have an abortion for sure. And of course the drawback on reproductive rights is not just happening in the States, and we've got a very international audience. We see that in other places, but I think it's wonderful to have all these different examples and illustrations of like how abortion care intersects with all these other processes of being pregnant, of losing pregnancies, miscarriage. And yet I think that's it almost can also be like a way of saying it's okay if we use it, like if somebody intended to get pregnant but they couldn't keep the pregnancy, or if there's something with the baby where they had to have an abortion, but it's also okay just to have an abortion because you don't want to have a child, or you're unable to, like you're not in position to, or whatever it is. Yep, absolutely. Like society, people want to tell us that, there are some situations where it's okay, and then there are these other situations where it's not okay, and that's different depending on who you asked. But the reality is, like any restrictions hurt all pregnant people, whether you plan to continue the pregnancy or not. Everyone needs abortion care to be safe and accessible and legal, regardless of whether you plan to continue the pregnancy or not.
Part of what can happen is when we're grappling with this kids or child-free decision, we really start going in circles. We get stuck thinking the same things over and over again, sort of being in our well-worn ways. And it can be really hard to take our thinking and our decision-making in a fresh direction, to actually get new insight and to feel like we're making steps forward towards a path, whatever that may be. if you want to break out of that rut that you are in and to get some insight from someone who is not your partner or not your mom, not your best friend, somebody who can really be impartial in this decision and can ask you thoughtful questions and who can make observations about what they're hearing and what you're seeing as far as where you're stuck and what it is you want, you definitely want to check out my Clarity Booster offering. This is the most accessible way of working with me one-on-one. What it is we meet for a 1-hour coaching call where we're going to tackle a specific aspect of your kids or child-free decision, where you're feeling stuck. I'm going to ask you a bunch of thoughtful questions. And after that coaching session, I'm going to give you some specific takeaways and exercises for you to do on your own after our call. Then a couple weeks later, we're going to meet up for a 30-minute follow-up call where we're going to see what kind of traction you've made, where you're at, and where we go from there. If you're interested in checking out the Clarity Booster offering, it's only $349 plus taxes. So it really is the most affordable way of working with me one-on-one, of getting my eyes and ears on whatever it is you're grappling with. I'm going to include the details for the Clarity Booster in the show notes of today's episode, and you can also find those over at kidsorchildfree.com. Again, that's the Clarity Booster. I look forward to hopefully hosting you soon for one of these calls. Back to the show. Hearing a lot of what you're sharing reminds me of me feeling really shameful that I didn't know if I want to have kids or not, and that whole decision, and how now being on the other side, I'm like, it feels like a zero issue to talk about being unsure, that I didn't want children, that I ultimately decided to be child free. And yet when people discover the work that I'm doing in this podcast, it's such a relief for them to be like, oh my God, I'm not the only person who's questioning this decision. I'm not the only person who's on the fence. And I want to delve into, I actually had a lovely, and it was partly the impetus for this conversation because there's so many different aspects of this kids or child-free decision. And I think, the abortion piece is so important to it for so many different regards that we'll be talking about today. But I received a lovely message from somebody who listens to the podcast, who shared a little bit about her situation. And I'd love to be able to share it here, which I've asked her permission to do so anonymously, of course, because I think there's a few things that we can talk about there specifically as it pertains to abortion and the kids or child-free decision. So she said, this is something I'm currently dealing with. Will my shame around my abortion affect how I am as a mother to my future kids? How much of my drive to want to be a mother is coming from my guilt of having an abortion as a teenager? I was diagnosed with PCOS after my abortion. What if I am unable to get pregnant again and I did not take my only chance when I was able to?
Yeah.
And so there's lots to talk about there. I want to get your take first of all.
Yeah,
and maybe we can pick it apart a little bit.
Yeah, this is a very beautiful, vulnerable question. And I relate to this a lot. So I want to say first, I'm so proud of this person for making the right decision for yourself at that time. And, that's such a tremendous act of love for yourself. And I'm sure that is something that if you choose to have children down the line, that will be reflected in your care for them and your relationship with them. So I think your desire to be a parent in no way needs to be defined by this guilt that you're carrying from this past decision. But, for me, for a long time, I also worried that having an abortion meant I wouldn't be able to fully enjoy motherhood, or that it would somehow cast a shadow over that experience, that because it wasn't the first time for doing it, that it was tainted or something. But that really hasn't been true for me. Like, choosing myself at that time has actually made me feel more confident in my ability to be the kind of parent that I want to be. And as I mentioned, many people don't realize this, but the majority of people who have abortions are already parenting. And there's really nothing conflicting about having abortions and also being a parent. And I think about this idea of like, there's not two paths. There's a decision and there are paths that fork from that decision, but it's not like my life would have been this way if I had chosen to continue this pregnancy, and it's this way because I didn't. That's sort of a false. It's a trick. And yeah, I think that's what I would. Yeah. That's what I would say.
Thank you
to that. But I really appreciate this person sharing that with us.
Yeah. And I think to go back to what we talked about earlier in our conversation, like it's okay to hold those sort of complex feelings and to what I'm hearing from your own experience, as well as it sounds like a lot of the people you speak to in your community, like there are all kinds of emotions that we may or may not experience if we have an abortion. Is that correct? Ranging from, I'm
Sure,
guessing,
yes.
like joy, excitement, peace, ambivalence, sadness, anger. Like, would you say all of those things are very like normal or welcome?
Absolutely.
And
all of those things are very, very normal. Any and all emotions that you feel about your abortion, about your pregnancy, about being a parent are all fine. And I have this thing in my Baking by Feel cookbook. I say that it's emotionally agnostic. And what I mean by that is that we don't have to place judgment on ourselves for experiencing emotions. Like we don't have to categorize our emotions as, oh, this isn't good that I'm feeling this. This is bad that I'm feeling this. Like it's fine either way.
Mm-hmm.
Like emotions, feelings don't have to have any kind of moral weight to them. And, it can be really uncomfortable, but it's fine to experience and engage with all of these emotions without feeling this kind of pressure to fix them. And that it's okay to just, sit with them. But for me, that's hard for me. Like I am someone who defaults to intellectualizing my emotions. Like I like to sit there and dissect them and figure out, where is this coming from? I'll do anything to avoid, actually just sitting there and feeling it. And that's part of why I wrote Baking by Feel, because I realized it helped me to sit with feelings if I was doing something with my hands, if I was, preoccupied. So for me, that was baking, using all your senses, this tactile thing. But it could be anything. I just chose baking because I'm a baker. Yeah.
I'm so okay. A couple of things. First of all, when I read, and I think it was might have even been another article or interview with you where I heard this term that you've referred to, emotional agnostic or agnosticism, and I was like, okay, I've never heard this term before. Did you coin it, or does it come from somewhere else?
I don't remember finding it anywhere. I think I made it up, but I don't know.
I'm crediting it to you.
I'll take it.
I just thought, yes, that is it. And once again, like I see such a parallel with this kids or child-free decision because, and I've talked about this on here before, but I'm going to say it again. For me, a major kind of turning point in my indecision and accepting my own feelings on the decision was being essentially emotionally agnostic. I don't know why that's a tongue twister for me.
It's hard to say.
About how I was feeling and being, and I haven't ever said that before because this is a new term for me, but it's effectively having self-compassion and just being like, it's okay not to want this. It's okay to feel like this aspect of motherhood gives you the ick. It's okay, to even feel shameful. Like it's okay to sit with these difficult emotions. And specifically the ones that I was judging myself for, like feeling like, oh, I'm not feminine enough. I don't, there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. It was okay for me to feel that way. But again, I was placing this sort of like external judgment I was making meaning of my feelings instead of just being like, well, this is just where I'm at right now for whatever reason, instead of trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
I totally get that. And I think I sort of talked about this a little bit earlier, but I do think it's just so helpful to like sit back and be like, okay, what is actually mine that I'm feeling, and what have I been told? And what have I been told is shameful that isn't. So as you're saying, you're feeling unfeminine because you don't want to have kids, and obviously that's not true, and but that's something, but it makes sense that you're feeling that because that is what we've been told. That's that's the script. So like, holding space for, yes, I am feeling that feeling, and it's okay to feel that feeling, but that's not really based in my reality.
100%. No, and I know, I had to do all of that, and I hear so many women who are feeling the same way. And similar to you, like dropping the shame around your abortion, like I feel zero shame now for wanting what I want and wanting what I don't want. But it's hard to arrive there. And so I think having this attitude or perspective of emotional agnosticism, I'm going to nail it this time, can be super helpful. And And I also like you talking about like, and that might be, I don't know if we're going to like bake our way to a clear kids or child-free decision, but I like this idea of getting into the body or sort of expressing or allowing your feelings to flow through something else, through a different medium than just thinking or writing or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's sort of this expectation that like, if you're going to go into this parenthood thing, that you have to be like a blank slate emotionally. Like you would just have to be excited. You can't feel any kind of fear or hesitation or anything. And like part of this, emotional agnosticism thing is like that feelings are multi-layered, conflicting, complex. And you don't have to make it not that way.
Yeah.
Whatever decision you're moving forward with can come with these conflicting things. And that doesn't mean that it's not the right choice for you.
Yeah. Or that you're not going to be like a competent parent, or that it makes you a bad mom or dad or whatever it is. So
absolutely.
Did you ever have, through pregnancy or this first year of your daughter's life, I mean, certainly it sounds like with pregnancy, but did you ever have like anxious feelings or worried feelings or resentful feelings or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When she was first born, I was totally convinced that I had like ruined my dog's life. This was like something that I was really worried about. I don't know why. I wasn't worried about like, keeping her alive or like anything even really related to that. It was like, oh my God, like my dog is going to have this horrible life. And I was fixated on this. And that did not happen. He has an incredible life. But yeah, you never know, I guess, what's going to come up for you, what you're going to be anxious about.
Well, and I think a lot of people, like, they have their worries or their anxieties, and therefore they think like, because they have those fears, that maybe they shouldn't move towards parenthood, or conversely staying child free. And I think those worries that we have, they can be like instructive or great teachers about what's going on within us and, you know, what's important to us. And sometimes they require us to address them. But it doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't do the thing, or that we have to clear through the fear in order to make the decision.
And since, this is sort of a redirect, but since having my daughter, I've had people, people start asking you like right away, like, when are you going to have another kid? And like, for me, like I'm 95% sure she's going to be the only one. And that's something that I'm sort of figuring out as I go. But people want to push back on that too. So it's like, whatever decision you make, there's going to be some opinions.
Oh, 100%.
I guess.
No matter what you choose, no matter what you do, someone's going to have something to say.
But that's new for me to just feel like, this is what's right for me. One kid is most likely right for me.
And I'm curious, are you open to sharing a little bit about that? Is that a conclusion and again, it sounds like you're still sort of drawing to like full conclusion, but it sounds very likely that's the case. Is that something you've come to after or since having a child, or before? Like, have you always felt like you would be
I did not always,
as they say?
I did not always feel like that. I was open to possibilities. I was like, I'll probably have 2 or 3. But since I've had her, I'm like, okay, this is, what's best for me and my kid. And that's sort of just what I feel like my capacity is. And, that can change, but it's just, it just feels like what is going to work for me. And that's fine. It's fine to have one.
100%. And it's, normalizing that all of these, like you say, first of all, it's not just I had an abortion and now I can or can't have kids. Like these 2 paths, it's not a dichotomous kids or child free. Like in some sense it is. Of course, I understand once you have a child, you no longer don't have kids. It's not necessarily, and I really encourage people, although we talk about kids or child free here, like the idea of starting with one makes a lot of sense, because you don't know what it's going to be like to have a parent and what that experience is going to be. And it's okay to have a vision of more, but to your point, you're allowed to change your mind, and that through the experiences we have, that's going to give us information that in turn allows us to like pivot, course correct.
And absolutely. Like I see the decision to have an abortion, the decision to have, for me, one child is just sort of like 2 sides of the same coin, and making these reproductive decisions that work best for my life, my family, me. And that's, individual to everybody. But I do feel I don't know. I feel maybe more confident in my decision because I had already made this decision about an abortion before.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It seems I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Without, knowing you
I
well.
feel confident in
Yeah.
making and knowing what's going to work for me, I guess.
Would you say, having navigated, the experience of your abortion, all the emotions that came with it, sort of shame recovery, if you will, like that has created a little bit more of, I don't know if compass is the right word, but it has made other big decisions easier to reside in and be like, this is for
Yeah.
me. This is my voice talking versus somebody else's.
Yes, exactly. I think
Yeah.
that's definitely
Yeah.
true. And people don't talk about that with making these abortion decisions. It's like
Yeah.
it can be a very loving decision for yourself.
Yeah.
And that skill can carry forward.
I wouldn't mind if you could share a little bit more about that. And also something you said previously, which I've seen you and heard you say a few times, which is that having an abortion has allowed you to be the mother that you are
Yeah.
today. Can you
Yeah.
tell us about that?
When I got pregnant the first time, like, I'm thinking about me. I'm this 20-year-old college student. I have a part-time job. I have a not super stable relationship. And none of that is conducive to me being able to provide the kind of stability and support that I would want to provide for my child. I'm much older now. I'm 32 now versus 20. And it's just a much better time for me to feel confident in parenting. That's not to say I might have been an amazing mother when I was 20. I don't know. Many people are, but just in my life, I feel really satisfied with what I've been able to do in those 12 years with my own life to make me feel comfortable stepping into a mother role. Yeah. And what's right for me is not right for everybody.
Yeah.
100%. It's different for everyone. Yeah.
Which is the beautiful thing about all these decisions, and also the challenging thing, right? Because there is no rule book or script. It's about finding our own way and making sense of our own decisions and coming to peace with them. And
I think it's been very useful for me to sort of learn how to unpack all of this shame that I had and not carry that into how I interact with my daughter.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Good point. Cool. Tell us. I always forget it's not just me, that eventually a bunch of people will listen. What do you love most about being a mom? I love seeing what she learns to do. And I mean, this is like, she's one, we can't really talk yet, but I'm surprised by the level of communication that you can have, that we've had since the beginning. I'm just like, you're my friend, you're my girl, like you're part of our family. I've really enjoyed adding to our family. I felt that way when we got our dog. I'm like, okay, like team Rea-Tucker, we're building this family. But I've really enjoyed just having another person to integrate into things in my life. And I've really enjoyed seeing other people in my life love her and enjoy her. And I've found community with other people who have children that are the same age, and I'm pretty introverted, so it's sort of been nice to have an opportunity to do that, to make my world a little bit bigger, I guess. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Well, she sounds like a lucky kiddo to have you as her mom.
I hope so. Yeah.
And doing this important work. I mean, I'm guessing, like, how much of you being an advocate for abortion, people who have abortions, and providing resources and support, how much of that is sort of in light of future generations and your daughter, and how much, and of course, if it's like, well, it's really about the now, and let's like just get through the next 90 days. But would you say you bear that in mind?
Yeah, I think my abortion work is very long term. It's like, we're shifting culture, we're shifting narratives. It will continue long down the road, but I'm hoping that, she can just grow up knowing that if you do experience a pregnancy, the default doesn't have to be continuing that pregnancy. And I think that's a very basic thing, but can be really great to grow up knowing that, like, your wants, your goals, your dreams are enough. They are
Mm-hmm.
important, and it's okay to prioritize those things, whether you have children or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that applies to this question of whether you have kids or not, to like hold our own dreams and lives at the forefront, and to know like you are enough, whether like
Absolutely.
as or not as a parent.
Yes.
And I think we so often have this idea sort of enforced upon us that unless we have children, we're not enough in and of ourselves, but we are.
Absolutely. Which
Yeah.
is just, obviously not the case.
Incorrect,
but you would think,
people.
But you would think it was because of how much,
Yeah.
You hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Before we wrap up, I have 5 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
I love asking all of my guests. All right. First question is, being a mom is, finish the sentence, I should say.
Okay. Being a mom is a choice that I made, and I am proud of myself for choosing what was right for me. And it's fun for me. I don't know. It's fun.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
Being a mom is not.
Being a mom is not mandatory.
Amen. What is one tool or resource that you think might help people who are on the fence about whether or not to have kids?
I think really tuning into your own self, and sort of taking a step back from what your mom says, what books say, what the internet says, what your partner says. Just taking, a step back to really ask yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What is one thing that you would like child-free people to know?
That I am so happy for that decision for you. I think, yeah.
All right. And lastly, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's currently on the fence about whether or not to have kids, what would that be?
I would say that your life is going to be beautiful and fulfilling and large and enough, no matter what choice that you make.
That's my favorite advice ever. I totally agree. I say it all the time. So you're preaching to the converted. All right. I said before we wrap up, but I'm going to say it again. Before we wrap up for reals this time, I want to know a few things. First of all, like, where can people find your current cookbook, which is or baking book, I should call it, Baking by Feel, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So it is in bookstores, wherever books are sold. You can find it on bookshop.org, or your local library.
Local bookstore.
Yeah. You can find links to all of my things at thesweetfeminist.com. That'll take you to my Substack, which is called A Little Something Sweet. You can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at The Sweet Feminist. But yeah, all of those things that you might want to find me are at thesweetfeminist.com.
All right. And we will link to all those things in the show notes as well, so people have those handy.
And the Abortion Companion comes out.
That was my next question.
Fall 2025. So another year, but it's coming.
Yeah, I just got wind of this book yesterday, I think it was, when I was on your Instagram. So, and you shared a little bit about that. What can people expect from the Abortion Companion when it comes out?
Yes, so it's an illustrated guide for people before, during, or after having an abortion, whether you are making the decision, whether you had an abortion 20 years ago and want to, process some of those emotions that you might still be having. It is non-judgmental. It is affirming. It's the kind of thing that I envision, people passing around to their friends. And it has exercises like self-compassion meditations, journaling prompts, affirmations. It has a place for my abortion story. It has a place for you to write your own. It has resources for accessing care, trusted resources. It can be hard to find good information. Google is not a reliable source of information. And there are abortion resources on my website as well. But yeah, it's a little book that I hope will just sit on your shelf for whenever you need it.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a much needed resource for many folks who are having had or will be having abortion. So thank you for doing this work, for everything that you're contributing to this world. And thank you for our conversation today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be on here. And yeah. I'm so glad.
Thank you for tuning in for this episode of the Kids or Child Free podcast. Now, I have a few new goodies for you over on the free resources page, which you'll find at kidsorchildfree.com. I will also link to this in today's show notes. And the new resources that I've added are a podcast episode, a secret podcast episode, if you will. It's a recording that I made prior to launching the Kids or Child Free podcast. And it's actually a very personal share of mine related to a situation that happened with a friend of mine. And it really talks about how triggering this kids or child-free decision can be. It's vulnerable. There may or may not be a few tears shed, and it's available exclusively when you head to the free resources page and sign up for it at kidsorchildfree.com. The other resource I recently added is the replay of the event we had earlier in the spring, which was the Between Friends conversation I had with my friend Lauren Grant, who is a filmmaker. She is a mom. And we talked all about how we've maintained our friendship throughout all the ups and downs that motherhood and this decision that I've made has brought. We talk about how you personally can navigate some of the concerns and the challenges that you might be having in your friendships when one of you has kids and the other one doesn't. Again, check it out. That's at kidsorchildfree.com under the free resources tab. Thank you again for listening today, and we'll see you back here soon for another episode of the Kids or Child Free podcast.